Good evening, America. This is Q News Tonight, the world's first live daily gay evening news show, and it's 7 p.m. Wednesday, February 19, 2020. Tonight, we queue up Vote 2020 right at the top of the show. The Bloomberg debate is tonight, and everything changes for the election. 6 candidates will debate tonight from the main stage in Las Vegas: Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren will all focus their attacks on the first presidential debate participation from Michael Bloomberg. It will be tonight live on NBC and MSNBC at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be held in the Paris Theater at the Paris in Las Vegas. And the moderators for NBC are going to be Lester Holt, Chuck Todd, Hallie Jackson, and others. Q News Tonight predicts that likely topics that we're going to hear about tonight is billionaires buying the election, all of these candidates focusing on Michael Bloomberg and his first participation in a presidential debate, all of the candidates focusing on Bernie Sanders leading all of the national polls, and all of the candidates then focusing on Donald Trump. That's what's going on tonight. What do y'all think about what we're getting ready to see? Are you excited, first off?
I am actually really excited. Democratic turnout in Nevada is already almost on par with what it was in 2016, with over 77,000 people casting their presidential preference vote for the Nevada caucus, which is on February 22nd. That being said, everything that you just mentioned, honestly, has nothing to do with the overall messaging of what the Democrats really need to be talking about. And it's how they're going to restore faith in the American government, both at home and abroad, and how they're going to speak to the issues of everyday Americans. So if they're going to focus on Trump, if they're going to focus on Bernie, if they're going to focus on Bloomberg, they're really just doing Donald Trump a solid and just doing everything they can, essentially, to reelect him.
Well, that's what I'm really interested about with Bloomberg, because it's been stated and speculated by friends of his that he's only entering this race to pull votes away from Sanders, that he's doing this for the greater good of the Democratic Party. And that sounds very, altruistic and possibly even like a positive thing if it means that you're going to beat Donald Trump. But it doesn't seem like that's what we're seeing happen, even if he is qualifying for this debate ahead of when he was going to first participate in the Super Tuesday events. I wonder if this is actually going to sway anything in terms of people that will vote for him or what events he'll have coming next.
I hope more than anything, because I think that it does need to be addressed, because I think it's very toxic. I hope the Bernie bro mentality that we've seen in 2016 and so prevalent in 2020 is addressed by all the candidates tonight.
From my perspective, tonight is the first time that reminds me of the Republican debates in 2016.
With all the candidates, you mean?
Yes,
figuring
with
out
this
what's going to
number
happen.
of candidates, and I think for the first time, all of the gloves are going to come off tonight. We are really going to see a back alley fist brawl, because I think most of the candidates realize that they are at a moment of make or break for
Well, they are, and Elizabeth Warren has the most to lose out of all of them. I mean, had the gloves come off earlier, I don't think she'd be polling in the manner she is.
Yeah.
How much do you think this is actually going to prepare them to face off against against Trump when it comes to it later this year? Are they going to have the same kind of cattiness where they're participating in having name calling, where they're adding adjectives to each other to try to brand?
Well, I think that's the appeal of Mike Bloomberg, honestly, and that's something that I actually like about Mike Bloomberg. Michelle Obama famously said, "When they go low, we go high." Screw that. Yeah. Really, when they go low, go lower.
Yeah, that's not going to work in 2020. With all due respect to the First Lady, it's not going to work against somebody like Donald Trump.
Yep.
It's 7 p.m., as we told you, Wednesday, February 19th, 2020, and it's time to queer up the news. So we are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your stories next on Q News Tonight. Well, as we said, America, we welcome you to Q News Tonight. We are live and unscripted, so anything can happen tonight. Whatever voice you hear here, you're going to hear it live. Tonight, we bring you the news of and a perspective from the LGBTQ community. We are unique in the entire world. I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and these are my co-anchors, Aaron Darr and Napoleon Plays. Let's queue up, queer up the news. We move first into breaking Q news. Amazing reporting today as a federal court rules that Florida cannot deny felons the right to vote over fines and fees. We've prepared what's happened in the federal court. Watch this.
Amendment 4 took effect last year, giving former felons the right to vote, and that does not include certain sex crimes or murders. Last month, Florida's Supreme Court said it could prevent folks with fines on their record from voting. That has now been overturned. Now, we delivered the news to Devin Coleman over a video chat just minutes ago. Here's his reaction.
Oh, man, like I'm excited. I can't even think of the words. He would die so I could have the right to vote. And in addition to that, I was able to turn the curve. I turned my life around.
It was back in 2018 when Florida voted to allow felons to have their rights back in terms of voting in the presidential or any other ballot. And some people are stating that this is punishment for those that are not able to pay fines, that are not able to, even if they've completed their sentence, not able to vote, that their ballots are being removed, that their voice is being removed. This obviously rings to a lot of people in terms of the Equal Protection Clause. We have a lot of understanding with that as the LGBTQ community, fighting in many different states federally to have equal and sexual orientation covered in the Equal Protection Clause. And that's what we're seeing happen right here. There are only 17 plaintiffs that are suing in this specific case, but it could have repercussions on over 1.6 million other people who are felons who have completed their service and just can't pay the fine.
You know, when I heard the news of the federal court making this ruling, this is breaking news in Florida and has effects all over the country. How dare the Republicans try, including the governor of Florida, try to take these voting rights away when the residents, the voters of Florida, did this through a ballot initiative? Yeah. They are specifically trying to take popular vote away, which is exactly what they argue in presidential elections and other elections in terms of fraud and rigged elections. Yeah. How dare them?
This is them overturning the voices and the wills of the people in a 2018 referendum, also known as Amendment 4, which restored the voting rights of over 1.6 million Floridians. And it's sad because they're doing it at the detriment of people who they're establishing this racist narrative, if you will, that many of these felons happen to be people of color. And a lot of people of color do tend to vote more liberally. And who is it that's against this and trying to propel this notion? It's the Republican-controlled legislature in Tallahassee, and it's the Governor Ron DeSantis, the Republican regime in Tallahassee that's propelling this notion, and it's hurting communities of color.
Yeah, you said it before, but just to say it very clearly right now, voter suppression is what this is. Just like with saying that people are voting more than once, just like gerrymandering, it's one of many issues of it.
Shame on Ron DeSantis.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, even though we know that our voices are being a little bit silenced and that people's voices are being silenced in terms of voting, we really hope that you will help us to keep our voices loud, because we want to know, are LGBT voices important to you? Can the news of the world have a gay community perspective? If you, like us, think the answer is a resounding yes, then like and subscribe to Q News Tonight on YouTube and on Facebook. Do our gay cultural stories impact you, your friends, and your family? Start a watch party. Get your circle involved in our conversation as it supports the gay community. It's that simple.
We continue in queuing up the USA tonight as we report that 226 bills target LGBTQ Americans this year, with one organization being behind many of them. We've prepared this. Watch what we've prepared.
The caucus was actually founded by Congressman Randy Forbes. It's a great story because he felt like the Lord asked him to begin praying in room 219, which is a strategic room right off the House floor, before the members of Congress go into votes. And so he reserved this room for 30 minutes every single week. This was back in 2001, and invited his colleagues from both sides of the aisle to come and pray for each other, pray for the nation. And they felt like that it just was the right thing to do and the crucial thing to do for the sake of our nation.
So as our viewers just saw in that video was an excerpt of an individual who's very supportive of the Congressional Prayer Caucus, which was founded by former United States Congressman Randy Forbes. And part of this initiative was to have this organization called Freedom for All, which went on to provide state legislatures all across the country with templates and strategies to pass anti-LGBTQ bills. And since its formation in the early 2000s, it's already propelled over 226 anti-bills, 4 of them being just put forth in the state legislature in Tallahassee and Florida this year alone.
I think the story is fascinating because it is an indication of how our rights can evaporate, but very secretively. An organization like this can come in through a back door and begin to work on state legislatures. We talk about down ballot issues. The presidential election, so important for down ballot houses, senates in individual states, governor seats. This is a perfect example of how important those issues
and how they come in right at the last moment, too. A lot of these bills were put in right at the very final moments of the deadline.
We continue in queuing up the USA to report tonight that a professor who claimed he had the right of free speech in a right to misgender trans students has now lost his court case. We've prepared the news of this. Watch this.
Well, I would like to be extended the same respect and dignity that I extend to my students. I don't expect my students or require them to express something that they don't believe or endorse an ideology that they don't hold. And I'm being required to do that.
Tyson, we're almost out of time, but quickly want to ask you, the magistrate has recommended the case be dismissed. What's your next step?
We'll be responding. We have an opportunity to respond to the magistrate's report, and we'll file those with the district judge. And we're hoping and hopeful that the district judge rejects the report and recommendation from magistrate and upholds the First Amendment rights of Dr. Merriweather.
Yes, that was Nicholas Merriweather, the professor of religious philosophy at Shawnee State University. He went on to state that a trans student that he was teaching who wanted to be identified by female pronouns could not be identified in that way. That he went on to say that she could only be identified, or that he could only be identified by the last name, she in this case. And he went on, Nicholas Merriweather, to sue, being backed up by the Alliance of Defending Freedom, the actual school. But the fun thing about this is that even though he was stating that his freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of protection were being violated, the judge went out and said, nope, that is absolutely not what happened, that government jobs limit the amount of free speech that you have, and that this was not within his right, that using pronouns don't convey any sense of identity belief on the user part, and that it was just being disrespectful on his end.
So the definition of the limitation of free speech was because he was considered a government employee.
Yes, and it makes sense because when you think about it, there are a lot of trans students at the school who have gone on record to now say, oh, I'm so much happier, I feel like I can be protected by my school, I don't feel like I'm going to be imposed just by going to this teacher's classroom. And that means something in an education environment.
We continue by queuing up business tonight at It's Happening, I was going to say It's Happening out at Q News tonight. The IRS has filed a lawsuit against Facebook today for $9 billion over offshore profits in Ireland. We have summarized the story. Watch this.
Well, Facebook is changing its tax structure. The company will start to pay taxes in the countries where sales are made, rather than funneling everything through its Irish subsidiary. You will recall that Facebook has come under pressure from the U.S. and Europe for its tax practices, specifically routing UK-based sales through Ireland. Here in the States, it is currently locked in a battle with the IRS that may cost it more than $5 billion, plus interest and penalties related to its Irish operations.
So as our viewers just saw in that video, the IRS is suing Facebook for over $9 billion for offshore profits in Ireland. This was done in a deal in 2010 where Facebook US moved a lot of these profits over to Ireland. And why did they do this? Obviously, there's a lower corporate tax rate in Ireland. So the IRS is going after Facebook essentially to get some of those profits.
Do in what's happening here with the IRS and Facebook. Do you have any preliminary understanding of whether there's a chance that the IRS is going to be successful in this?
Well, it's interesting because they're actually going after $14 billion in royalties that Facebook Ireland paid to its parent company, Facebook US. So it's literally just, it's money laundering. I mean, essentially, that's really what this is. So I expect that the IRS is going to make a very substantial case, and I do expect them to win.
Yeah, very interesting. We queue up science. That's something that we don't say at Q News Tonight very often, but tonight we talk about science. Natural gas, as it turns out, is contributing much more to climate change than was previously thought. We've prepared a summary of what is happening in this science area. Watch this.
We went to about 120 of those facilities.
The study determined that methane is leaking from natural gas sites at an alarming rate, higher even than EPA estimates. Here's why that's concerning.
Methane itself is a much stronger greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide.
80 times worse, in fact, and too much of it speeds up climate change. The study found about 2.3% of all methane gas that's mined is leaked into the air, enough to power 10 million homes for a year, according to the EDF.
The big deal here is that methane gas apparently is a lot more in our environment than we thought, that a lot of the fossil fuel emissions, that a lot of the climate change problems that we're experiencing are not just due to carbon dioxide. Now, this is a positive in the sense that now that we have a better understanding of it, that a lot of it comes from methane, which is human-derived and from things that we have pushed out since the Industrial Revolution, at which point it was, I think, 150 times less of a pollutant at that point. This is some of the comparison between methane and CO2. Methane is 90 times more effective at trapping heat in the environment. It is 150%, the Industrial Revolution, it has gone up 150% since the Industrial Revolution, and it stays in the atmosphere for only 9 years, versus carbon dioxide, we often think of the carbon footprint, as lasting for 100 years, or hundreds of years. So we have to balance how much of each is in the environment, and they're both going to play a huge part in the climate change conversation. And we know that the climate change conversation involves all people, it affects all people. But one thing that we don't think about maybe enough, our youth, our LGBT youth, they take 40% of all homeless people are LGBT youth. We have to consider that when you're talking about climate change, that means a lot of people sleeping outside, dealing with shelters that might be underfunded, especially if they're for queer or minority groups. And this has a long-term implication for all sorts of societies.
I hadn't thought about that. So you're suggesting that the number of LGBT that are homeless, and because they're outside so much more, they are adversely in percentage affected by climate.
Yeah, it's called environmental sexism in terms of how this plays into the environmental aspects.
It's really fascinating. Aaron, we were talking about this before Q News Tonight, that a very significant portion of methane gas is created by...
It's from factory farming, actually. So a significant portion of the methane that's affecting and impacting the environment globally negatively is due to factory farming, and it's coming from cows releasing themselves, so passing gas. That's where most of it's coming from. So there's a call to action to try to eat less meat, red meat.
Well, we'll eat other meat anyway here on this show. I'm sure that we'll talk about more fun things and fun people.
And that's a very interesting story.
So from that meat to the other meat, Justin Bieber.
That's
where my
exactly
brain
right.
was.
Let's move on to the other red meat, and that is queuing up entertainment.
Redneck meat.
Justin Bieber says he endured bad examples of Christians before following Jesus. It's an interesting story of what he has said today. Watch this.
How did you find yourself away from, I believe in Jesus, but I'm going to drink or do drugs or sleep around or all these other distractions? How did you get out of that world? What was the turning point for you?
I think it was my perception of who Jesus really was, I'd had really bad examples of Christians in my life who would say one thing and do another. So they were my direct example of who Jesus was.
That's why you didn't take it seriously.
I didn't take it as seriously because I didn't have good examples.
Good role models.
Yeah, and so I think the more I really looked at the character of who Jesus really was.
So as you just saw, pop star Justin Bieber is crediting his faith in Jesus to saving his life based off of his anxiety issues and his issues centered around addiction in his new docuseries on YouTube called Seasons. So addiction is something that obviously can affect any and all people. It's something that's a prominent issue in the LGBTQ community, and we wish him the best. Q News Tonight is part of the Happening Out television network. We are the Daily News. But you can also watch the best of entertainment live every Monday night at 8 p.m. on happening.fun. And we are also part of the most popular live gay TV show in the world every Wednesday night, tonight at 8 p.m. on It's Happening Out. It's a talk show like television's The View, with a whole lot of gay people, 2 of them sitting right across from me.
Oh, you have some nerve.
You are welcome.
Right.
It's the bow tie I gave him away.
Yes. Was that it? The bow tie?
Yeah,
Got it.
it's science.
Yes.
You just want to flip it.
Science.
You know it. I feel like
I'm loving that Napoleon is doing the science story tonight. We also let you know, America, that we're broadcasting from our new set here in the middle of the World AIDS Museum. Now, when we finish in February, we're not going to say new set anymore because we've been here since January 6th in this new location.
So there's a cutoff.
But we're broadcasting in the middle of the World AIDS Museum and Education Center, right here in Wilton Manors and Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We also always joke that we're coming from the gayest place on planet Earth. So we're broadcasting here with these 2 gay guys, and we're getting ready to do It's Happening Out, and wait till you see the bevy of gay people that are going to be on that talk show tonight at 8 o'clock.
It's why we're your network, world.
That's
all
exactly
for you
right.
queers.
And I'm going to make fun of all of them because I'm the only straight one on the show.
You say that like that would be a good thing.
April Fools!
Pride. Is it
April
Pride
Fools
Month
in
yet?
February!
We also would like to thank our set designer, Concepto Modern Living. They helped create this set. They're located right here in Fort Lauderdale. Have a very crisp eye and look at Concepto Modern Living here in Fort Lauderdale. Next, we have a big finish. Now, we're gay, so we always like a big finish. There are many stories today that we only want to mention. Let's see if Aaron and Napoleon and I can entertain each other, because that's our #1 standard, by the way, of doing this show, as we have a lightning round to review these big stories that are LGBT or news with an LGBT perspective. If either one of these guys talk too long, I'm going to ring this bell. Just like that. And they've got to finish immediately. Now, gentlemen, and I use that very loosely, do you understand what the rules are here?
Starting my engines, and may the best woman win.
Win? Okay. All right, here we go. Q News tonight, the big finish. The big finish topic story #1 from the Donald's fake news file. Andrew Young has announced today he's joining CNN.
Yes, Andrew Yang is joining CNN.
What did I say?
Andrew Young is not
I
a
said
gay.
Andrew Young. Oh,
Andrew
he's
Young.
a mayor from Atlanta. Andrew Yang.
It's that gay list, boys and girls.
It was better than Rosario Dawson.
Former presidential candidate.
Andrew Yang is joining CNN
Okay.
as a commentator.
Y'all are bitches.
I'm hoping I can still get free money. That's all I hope he can deliver somehow.
Yeah, this doesn't.
Full tuition money, you mean?
Yeah. Yes. For
This
my
doesn't
little book
surprise
from
me.
20
I think
years
a
ago.
lot of people honestly run for president knowing that they're likely not going to win. They get their name out there, they get a book, and a lot of them
And then
become
they get better
commentators
jobs.
on television.
Yeah.
It worked for Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
And it worked for Morning Joe. I didn't say that often. The big finish, story #2. And this is for gay boys. It always seems bigger is better. Amazon's very first employee says the company's current size scares him. Size apparently does matter.
I like the context and the juxtaposition of that.
Thank you.
That was added.
750,000 employees, and they make $232 billion a year.
But don't worry, 10 billion of that is going to go to fight climate change. So he's doing his part, Bezos.
I would like to see them make sure that a lot of these jobs from Amazon are sourced in major metropolitan cities across the United States, particularly here in South Florida. There are pros and cons to it with a monopoly that they can hold over consumers in various industries, but I mean, this is capitalism.
Yeah, well, just like with gay boys, safety first.
The big finish, story #3, gay marriage versus straight porn stars. Pause. Mayor Pete is quoted today as saying, "One thing about my marriage is it's never involved me to send hush money to a porn star."
And the library is open, children. I love this. I think that this is great. I was watching a CNN town hall with Mayor Pete last night where he actually made this comment. And this is authentic, this is genuine, this is sincere, and it's so true. Donald Trump, Rush Limbaugh, all the swamp, they're the last ones to talk about
I think
family
he's
values.
doing what Hillary Clinton didn't do, or maybe we're seeing some of that authentic, catty self right at the end where it could boost his performance.
I'm disappointed that I don't get to see Stormy and that crazy attorney every night of the week anymore. The big finish, story #4. Can I personally, Al asks, can I have 3 husbands? And the reason I ask is because the Utah Senate has voted to decriminalize polygamy among consenting adults. Welcome to the 19th century.
I was having this discussion actually about this in my political theory class at Nova.
By the way, the three of us are not going to marry at the end of Q News tonight.
Perfect.
It just got horrifying. We didn't even mention coronavirus.
So we were just having this conversation about this and the ramifications of this and how it can dramatically affect human sex trafficking. But basically what they're doing essentially here is they're just essentially putting a citation for ticketing people where it's a slap on the wrist. And
Aaron, can I just live in a space where I'm thinking about having 3 husbands and that be enough? The Big Finish, topic number 5. It's a slow news day, America. So happy 57th birthday to Seal.
I love seals. I love them. It's so great. Climate change, Greta Thunberg.
Didn't he have the whole song about how you're never gonna? Wasn't that him?
Don't
You're
forget,
never gonna
it's
survive
also
a
Jeff
seal?
Daniels' 65th birthday, and the Motown man himself, Smokey Robinson, turns 80 today.
If you're gonna dance, we need to turn on the music. Please, someone in production.
The Big Finish, story number 6. We've been there, and we left our heart in Havana. On this day in 2008, Fidel Castro stepped down as the leader of Cuba.
I look forward to the day that we can say that about Trump.
Amen.
Yeah, that's a great finish. The Big Finish, story number 7. Let's add one more Trump pardon this week. Breaking news this afternoon, it is alleged Trump offered WikiLeaks' Julian Assange a pardon if he would cover up Russian hacking of the Democrats.
I don't see this happening. I can tell you there would be complete and total outrage and disgust by both Democrats and Republicans. What Julian Assange did essentially put in jeopardy American interests both at home and abroad, and it endangered our troops. This would be completely idiotic and stupid, and Republicans, including Senate Majority Mitch McConnell, I'm sure, would stand very steadfast.
But that's what our president did too, so I'm not sure I agree with you. I'm more curious as to how this plays out. This is a giant cliffhanger as to what actually happened. What did Julian Assange say afterward? It makes it seem like he said, no, I can't stand for you.
Well, can't you wait to open the newspapers or watch television tomorrow? Because we're going to learn a lot from this. Because it's going to be
battle of the
Roger Stone coming to a theater near you.
To a theater near all of us. The Big Finish, story number 8. Apparently, what happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. Tonight, the big debate. Someone has glued tiny MAGA hats and Trump wigs onto pigeons in Las Vegas.
I think this is awful. I mean, I'm a total animal rights person. I can't find this to be funny or humorous at all. I think this is awful to do this to an animal.
I think that's actually what I was thinking about it, how a lot of people that don't support Trump are liberal, and so this is a sign of protest. But I think it must be really interesting to be in New York and just see like a lot of like flying floppy hair MAGA hats going around in the city. That must be a visual art piece that it is animal cruelty.
The one thing I will say is they're kind of clever in doing this because putting MAGA hats and Trump wigs on pigeons, it's completely makes sense because we've been being shit on as a nation by Trump over the last 3 years.
All right, America, that is today's news for the LGBT community on the world's first daily gay evening news show. Remember, if it's important to the LGBT community, it's important to Q News Tonight. We, as we said at the top of the show, are out of the closet and into the headlines. And this is Q News Tonight. Thank you, and as always, we'll see you tomorrow night at 7. Good night.